The problem with being an only child is that if you're a god, people think that you can do whatever you want because no one can take you down a peg. Hades, god of the dead in Greek mythology, suffered this issue for most of his existence. Despite being as powerful as Zeus, Hades is considered the villain of Greek mythology simply for ruling the underworld the way he saw fit. He may have been feared, but he wasn't cruel. He just wanted to do his job. Hi everyone! They were actually quite magnificent, consisting of many halls and chambers with tall ceilings and pillars that stretched up through the roof. While most people feared going to the underworld, heroes like Heracles and Orpheus were welcomed by Hades because of their heroic deeds. In fact, he occasionally gave mortals valuable gifts, probably because he was lonely and wanted company. One such gift was his invisibility helmet, which he gave to the hero Perseus. Fortunately for him, Hades took pity on him and sent a fire-breathing dwarf named Cleito to lead him to his destination. When Gaia, the primordial goddess of the earth, unleashed a giant serpent upon the world. The Olympians were too afraid to fight it themselves, so they sacrificed their leader, Prometheus, in an attempt to appease the monster. However, when Hades saw this, he took pity on Prometheus and allowed his daughter Melino to be sacrificed instead. If there's one thing we've learned about Hades, it's that he didn't try to usurp Zeus like his brother Poseidon did. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on all things mythology. Sure, he wasn't happy about being cheated out of the throne, but he accepted his fate and moved on with his life. Had he tried to take over Olympus, though, he likely would have been defeated and imprisoned by Zeus, maybe for eternity. So he never did it. Instead, he ruled the underworld the way he saw fit, knowing that he couldn't do anything else. This appeased the serpent, and it retreated back into the earth. Without this help, Theseus would likely have died in the labyrinth before ever seeing the Minotaur. With this gift, Perseus was able to defeat the monster Medusa as well as escape the wrath of the gods. Another gift was his agriculture-themed goblet, which he gave to King Midas. Well, thanks to Hades, this never happened. You see, the dead were kept in the underworld for a reason. Hades knew that if the dead could just leave whenever they wanted, the world wouldn't be stable. So he kept them locked up tight. Now, there were some exceptions to this rule, like Heracles, whose restless spirit caused the ground he was buried under to split apart and let him rise. Or Alcestis, who was brought back to life by her husband after spending only one day in the underworld. But these cases were rare. For the most part, the dead stayed dead. With this gift, Midas was able to turn anything he touched into gold, although he soon realized that having such power was a curse rather than a blessing. In fact, Hades was so impressed with Heracles, he offered him a choice. He turned Semele into a stone pillar and hid her away in a cave, while he rescued Ino and her brother Athamas from certain death by wrapping them both in a cloud and taking them to live with him in the underworld. He could either take Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guarded the entrance to hell, and make it his pet, or he could take a golden apple from the garden of the Hesperides. Of course, Heracles chose the apple, which gave Hera the perfect excuse to harass him even more than she already did. The floors were inlaid with precious metals and gems, and the walls were decorated with priceless works of art. Even the chairs and couches were made of ivory and gold. While the other gods lived in simple stone houses or floated on sky islands. Hades had the most magnificent palace in the entire universe. Today, we'll be looking at 10 ways Hades was a good god. Hell, also known as the underworld, was where the souls of the dead went after death. One of the biggest reasons Hades became such a well-known god was because of his marriage to Persephone. Now the story of their marriage is a little weird to say the least. When Persephone was merely a child, Hades asked her father the Titan Cronus, for her hand in marriage. Cronus agreed to this union without even asking Persephone, who was only 9 years old at the time. Then Hades took her from her home and brought her to live with him in the underworld. This made her mother, Demeter, very upset. She searched the earth for her daughter, making plants wither and die in the process. After 4 days of searching, she found out what Hades had done and demanded he return her daughter. Zeus then negotiated between the two, deciding that Persephone would spend 1/3 of every year with her father in the underworld, another third with her mother on earth, and the last third with whoever she wanted. But the story doesn't end there. Each time Persephone ate food in the underworld, she became bound to it a little more each time. The pomegranate seeds stuck to her belly, and so she would spend more and more time in the underworld every year. However, it wasn't a place of torment and suffering. It was where the dead went to wait until they were judged by the gods. This judgment would decide whether their next destination would be Elysium, where the good souls went, or Tartarus, where the bad souls were sent to suffer. But Hades didn't create the underworld or these rules. He simply enforced them, and he was fair about it. Those who had led good lives would receive a nice afterlife. Those who had led bad lives were punished accordingly. Like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things mythology. Now, let's get started. 1. He didn't create hell. There seems to be a common misconception that Hades was the ruler of hell. 2. He married Persephone, daughter of Demeter. 3. He built magnificent palaces. While some parts of the underworld were dark and dreary, Hades' palaces were anything but. 4. He welcomed heroes into his home. 5. He provided valuable gifts to mortals. Hades didn't hate mortals, despite what the myths would have you believe. 6. He saved the Theban heroes. When the Theban heroes, Semele and Ino, were being persecuted by the goddess Hera, Hades took pity on them and saved them. 7. He helped Theseus slay the Minotaur. When Theseus volunteered to slay the Minotaur in the labyrinth, he got lost on the way to the beast's lair. 8. He gave his own daughter to save Olympus. 9. He kept the dead from rising. Many people fear the dead rising from their graves and wreaking havoc on the world. Well, thanks to Hades, this never happened. The dead were kept in the underworld for a reason. Hades knew that if the dead could just leave whenever they wanted, the world wouldn't be stable. So he kept them locked up tight. There were some exceptions to this rule, like Heracles, whose restless spirit caused the ground he was buried under to split apart and let him rise. Alcestis, who was brought back to life by her husband after spending only 1 day in the underworld, but these cases were rare. For the most part, the dead stayed dead. 10. He never tried to usurp Zeus. Now it's time for you to make your voice heard. Comment below which myth about Hades is your favorite.